this time, we're moving into our second segment, and I'm going to call my sister, the next moderator, Yonique Hendricks. She is the housing coordinator for the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services. She's a parent ambassador for Waterbury Bridge to Success. She's a community advocate. She's a sister. She's a safe place. She's a hard worker. She's a mom and a parent and a wife and a lot of wonderful things. Come on and give a round of applause for my girl, Yonique Hendricks.
That's a real good introduction. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So I'm going to start off. In the late 1960s, the Waterbury's North Square became a flashpoint for racial unrest. The riots reflected community frustration with inequality and injustice, and they remain an important part of the city's history. Today, we revisit those events and their lasting impact. I would like to introduce our panelists for this segment, Senator State Representative Larry Butler, Mario Barnett, and Neil Hollinger. Please come to the front. Oh, Robbie Wright? Okay, sorry about that. Rob Wright. Okay. Look, you guys are less than four. Okay. So our first question, what was the process of forming these riots and how did it get received by the community? Who would like to be first?
I'll go first. Okay. Well, we're here to discuss the riots here in Waterbury, as was previously mentioned. 1967, 1968 were some volatile years, not only here in Waterbury, but the whole nation. And back then there was no cell phones, no social media, so where you could actually mobilize a lot of people in a short period of time. Thing was, back then, there's so many other things that actually led to the riots. It came over frustrations of what was going on in everyday lives. And as we saw in the first panel, education was always a struggle for us. And just, I want to set the stage of what was the tender that actually fueled the fire which led to the riots. I mean, talk about education, first started with Brown versus Board of Education, Thurgood Marshall action, winning that case to defeat segregation, the Montgomery bus boycott. The Little Rock Nine required National Guards to get children to be able to enter schools. Okay, James Meredith had to fight to get into University of Mississippi. George Wallace, there was mention of Mayor Bergen saying that, Kennedy wouldn't be integrated. Well, Governor George Wallace stood at the front of University of Alabama and said that they would not allow black people to enter University of Alabama. And then these were the things that were being done to hold us back, but then the more violent times, Medgar Evers was shot in his own driveway and killed back in 1963. In 1963, the 16th Street Church in Alabama was bombed, and 4 girls were killed. The Watts riots happened in 1965. 5 days of rioting, 34 people died. 1,000 people were injured. Then Bloody Sunday, we kind of remember that. John Lewis and others actually attempted to march from Selma to Montgomery. And what started to happen at this time was network TV started to cover some of this stuff, which made all the difference, because when you heard about it, it's one thing, but when you saw it on nightly news, police on horses with dogs and nice sticks, beating people bloody to the ground, that's what started even more of a groundswell. Back then, I don't know about most of you, we got 3 channels, okay? With a TV, they had intended to get good reception, you had to put aluminum foil on it. Okay, so they weren't covering a lot. At any rate, just tell you what fueled the fire. Malcolm X was killed. Okay? Kennedy High School opened also in 1965, and there was a fight for integration, Boo Gatlin, and a lot of people fought to actually win that battle. But that was only the first battle, because also it came up again later on with the middle schools. Just think, most of the black folks who lived in inner city, where did they build the middle schools? Just think where they're located. They're all on the outskirts. Right? So how difficult was it to get to school, and who would be in those lines that were drawn to have kids go there? Okay, the Black Panther Party was formed in 1966 because of people in the Oakland Bay area were killed by police officers. This was starting to get covered, especially the part when the Black Panthers armed themselves. You saw a lot of pictures of that. The riots were ongoing because of the Rat Pack here in Waterbury, Connecticut. And it's hard to get information about the riots. If you Google it, you know what comes up? Do you think it's black people being disenfranchised? No. First thing that comes up is the Rat Pack. Because they were the intimidation force. They were coming to the Board of Education meetings. At 150, the members showed up with their leather jackets. While we were fighting for segregation, they were fighting to keep it white. Yeah. Okay, and then they started intimidating people coming through the neighborhoods, and that was just about it. When they started coming through the square, that was just it. Black folks said enough is enough. And they got into fights, the police came, black people, and we had faith in the police department, nowhere in the Waterbury, because they allowed the Rat Pack to intimidate our folks. And they just stood by and watched. So that's, after a couple of people got in the fight, it expanded, and that's what took place to actually set the stage for the riots. It didn't happen overnight, it happened over a number of years. So, I just want to set the stage.
So I'll say this question one more time. What was the purpose of forming these riots and how did it get received by the community?
Well, I didn't know I was going to speak today or anything, so there's not too much that I remember. But I was a member of the Letterman's Club, and then me, Huey Williamson, the Warrior Ward, we went to the march on Washington. We drove down all that night. You know what I mean? After that, and then that's when things started. But in Waterbury, as the Letterman's Club, we tried to make a beautification program. We tried to make Waterbury and integrate a lot of places that was here. You would take like Fairmont. Fairmont was segregated. It only had maybe 1 or 2 blacks up there, or either Bucks Hill, and we helped integrate that. But what we tried to do was make the community better. You know, and to make the community better, we just started doing things and then involving other people in the community. I think people here, I don't remember a lot of stuff now because I'm getting older and my brain don't function like it used to. But I am glad to see there's everybody here, and I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be a part of what is here. You know what I mean? And I'm glad to see that we're bringing our young people into the game, because that's what we need. Us old people are fading out. We're gonna have to bring the young people in. And we're gonna have to start teaching them at an early age to see what they want and obtain it. You must be able to stand up, sit up, or even shut up.
I hope everyone can hear me.
Yes.
This guy sitting next to me was my big brother during the times he's talking about, and he and Huey and a number of other brothers in the community dragged me up. And I learned a lot from this brother here in terms of what it meant to be a black man in America and what as a black man I had to do to maintain myself. Now, everyone in the audience needs to look to the left and to the right. And you have to understand that you were what the civil rights movement looked like. You did not have people running around with red capes and S's on their chests saying, I'm a civil rights activist. This is one thing that people have to understand, because there's a tendency to portray civil rights activists that were involved in dealing with a lot of these things that Ian was just talking about as supermen and superwomen. No, they were you. They were sick and tired of being sick and tired. That's the most important thing to understand. Fannie Lou and him, we were sick and tired of being sick and tired. Black folk during this period, and this is almost post-civil rights movement, were confined in Waterbury to the north end. This was a very segregated community. The people downtown did not listen to us. The people downtown did not care about our problems. The only thing out there to deal with our problems was us. You have segregated schools, you have segregated communities, you refuse to do something about it, then our response was not a riot, it was a rebellion. See, this is what we have to understand. We as a people decided what we were going to do to deal with these problems. Society as a whole could care less. Neil can tell you, we were stuck in the north end. See, Waterbury today is not what Waterbury was when I was coming up. We were in the north end, squeezed in. We couldn't live on the other side of Route 8. We had to live off of North Main Street, from the bottom of Cook Street up. We had to stay in Long Hill. We had to stay in segregated communities. But the important thing to understand is we got sick and tired of being sick and tired of it. The point I want to make here is very important. Changes in society come from you. This is very important to understand. You can't sit around and wait for someone who's supposedly been elected to office. Though there are a lot of good people that are elected to office. But you cannot wait for them to do what you need done. What you need done has to be led by you. Politicians follow. Politicians don't lead. Politicians follow. And the point that we're going to be making here today is rebellion, not riots, rebellions, because that's what they were, come from here. We need change. Things are not going the way we need them to go. So what do? Well, they won't let us do anything else. Frustration was what led to those rebellions. Frustrations with the politicians in the established order not doing what needed to be done to change our situation. We changed our situation. This is very important. We changed our situation. Now, there's other things that we have to do today. Who's going to change it? So-called elected officials or you? When something has to be done, you don't look to downtown. You don't look to City Hall. You look to the person sitting next to you. You all turn left, you see that person. You all turn right, you see that person. Y'all is going to make change in this society. And I think this is very important to understand because people look at so-called riots as the expression of them colored folk. No. That came out of frustration with the established order. They would not change things for us. We need to have them change. The frustration took the form of rebellion. You're not going to do it? Fine. We're going to do it. Nothing has changed. Now, I'm not saying you riot to riot. I'm not saying that is the alternative. What I'm saying is the problems that we have that still exist today are what led to those rebellions. Amen. We have to understand this. Now, I was very lucky. When I was in Boston, I used to be a teacher in the public school system, and I got to know Bob Moses from the Civil Rights Movement, who had been an aide to Dr. King, had moved to Boston, and we got to be very, very good friends. And he used to tell me a lot about what happened during the Civil Rights Movement, what they did as civil rights activists. And I simply asked him, well, you know, what did King do? King did what the masses wanted him to do. See, there's a tendency to put an S on King's chest. If it hadn't been for people like the people sitting in this audience, there wouldn't have been no King. And like I said before, as Fannie Lou Hamer said, we were sick and tired of being sick and tired. You get sick and tired long enough, then you have to rise and do something about it. And that's what happened. And that's the key thing to understand. It was people like you during the Civil Rights Movement and then the other movements that came after it. We talk about the so-called riots. They weren't riots. They were rebellions. You're not going to change things, but then we're going to change it. That is what is most important about discussing that period of time in the United States. No one else changed it. We took it upon ourselves to change it. Understand this. Everything you have now came from what we did. Not someone else did. What we do is what determines what happens for our future, our children, their children. If there's things that have to be done, well, City Hall is a nice place. There's nice offices in there, and, you know, they have lunch brought in, and, you know, it's a very nice office situation. That's not where change takes place. When I was a kid coming up, and Neil will tell you about this, my mother used to drag me down to City Hall when they have meetings, and you can have guys like Neil standing in the back of the room with their arms folded and staring at the mayor. Mayor kind of pulled his act, because he knew those people represented our community. They stood in the back of that room, and every single person in the back of that room had their arms folded, and they would look at the mayor. Y'all better do what we suggesting that you do, because these are things that need to be done in our community so it can advance. We need our community taken care of. Now, unfortunately, they didn't want to do that, and unfortunately, we had to have what they call a riot. It's called rebellion. But change had to be made. We could not wait for them to change it for us. We had to change it. Yes. And that was a form that it took. There were other forms also. Violence. That's not so cool. The nonviolent movement is what dominated the period of protest. That won. Not because it was violence versus nonviolence. It was the people supported what civil rights activists did during that period. There was support. You didn't go down to City Hall and kowtow to the mayor. You didn't go up to Hartford and kowtow to the governor. As you look to your leaders, such as Dale, in the community, and said, this is what we need. We will help you get it for us. The key thing is, we will help you. That is what makes change. That is what gets you what you need. So, as this forum continues, think about it. What can I do to help things move along? What can I do to assist people like Neil, who are out there trying to do things for us? What's on television is nice. You sit on the couch, you pull out after work, chill, watch TV. That's nice Saturday. Rest of the time, you've got to be out there helping and assisting those people that are out there trying to make change, positive change for us. That's how it's done. Not someone else, we do. Woo.
I was listening to my preceding gentleman, and they're all correct on exactly what they said. You know, I was just a foot soldier, you know, in the streets and in the army at the time of 1960 riots. Or I should say, the rebellions. That's it. A much better word. I call it this own. I used to say we were disorderly, obedient, and not trying to be obedient to the man anymore. Most of us were on the street. So we can have educations. We were strictly foot soldiers. And I don't say we were being used. What I say is that we were helping the movement the only way we knew how. You know? And that was to get out there and raise hell, for lack of a better word. So we were raising the smoke in the Waterbury North End, you know? And believe me, I had no business being out there because I was in the United States Army at that time. But they were killing my brothers in Vietnam, and I figured if I took a few out, what the hell? I was in war on the street, you know. I left for Texas in 1965, and I saw integration being put into place down there. And I thought, wow, they own businesses, blacks own stores, they got streets named after them. I said, in Waterbury, all that I left when I left Waterbury in 65 was Bailey's shoe shine parlor, you know. So I was ready to come back and do some changing, because I was in the job corps then. Instead, I came and got a little job in a little factory, went to work, and came home on a daily, getting insulted all the way through town, you know, and I didn't like that. So I immediately joined the Army. It would have been the Marines, but my mother wouldn't sign a paper. And joining the Army, I came home in 1967 on a leave because I had broken my foot. A wall locker had fallen on and broke all my toes. So in 1967, the first rebellion we had, I was home on leave because I was getting ready to go overseas to Germany. And while I was home, I was standing on North Square in front of Leader's Oil, next to the Elks. And the next thing I know, I was in the midst of a rebellion. That's it. You know? Probably would have been a very quiet rebellion if we had any kind of communication with the Waterbury Police Department, but we didn't have any at the time. To be exact, if I remember correctly, they were in riot gear before we got there. So they must have planned a riot and called it a rebellion. You know? Well, I got gassed somewhere between Leader's Oil and Budget Market. I still remember Waterbury clearly, right over by Spark Street. You know, I got gassed by the police because we had turned around because they were shooting. And when I heard the shots, we all turned around to see why they were shooting. And one of the guys from the street, one of the old boys, Weasel, to be exact, anybody know him? Yeah. Weasel was laying on the ground. So immediately we said they shot Weasel. Well, Weasel stood up and we realized Weasel had got trampled by the crowd, you know. But the police chased us all the way to Budget Market, and then they disappeared. We didn't see them. They were gone, and we were just left. We didn't burn Waterbury down in 1967. We had no intentions. We didn't even want to fight. But the fight was on, you know. The fight was on. We were not going to, I guess, be their footstool anymore. We were going to bring Waterbury out of the Dark Ages, at least North Square. And I remember it starting, and I remember that whole night. And because I remember it well, because it was the first day I had a chance to put shoes on, because my broken foot had healed. But needless to say, we walked up the street, up to Orange Street, and Babe's package store was there. It was already broken into, but we decided to go in and finish cleaning out the shelves. I had an armful of gin when the police and I ran from Babe's package store on Orange Street to Ward Street. And when I got to Ward Street, there was a patch of dirt. I slipped, I fell, and broke my foot. The riot was over for me. But I remember how rude and disrespectful the police department was to the people in the neighborhood. I remember them coming up to my mother's house with shotguns pulled and scaring the hell out of my mother and my sisters. This I remember well. I remember 67. I remember it to the point where it will never leave my mind, but I hold no resentments or grudges because of it. I think we moved along with the whole movement at that time. We became just as progressive because we weren't only going to just march peacefully, we were going to fight. We were going to fight for whatever we had that they wouldn't give us peacefully. You know? So we fought, and I took my, I guess you could say, my rebellions off into the army with me and overseas. And I think the proudest moment of my life was when I was in the United States Army, when Martin Luther King had got shot. And the guys in my outfit, all the black guys in my outfit, that morning gave the power sign to the flag. Because we had all became really militant by that time. We weren't getting any kind of, as we call, justice by the normal run-of-the-mill. So, coming out, I know one thing that the revolution, or how should I say, not the revolution will not be televised, as Gil Scott said. But what we were going through, I knew that the only way that I was successfully going to move forward was to get an education. So I went back to school, and then I went back to college, and I started working in the community. You know, am I going too far into this question? And working in the community, I had worked with both white, black, Hispanics, and everything on the job I did, you know. But what my kids saw was me do a good job. And they became good counselors and mental health specialists like I was, you know. So I'm continually happy today, but the happiest day that I had was when my daughter was about 8 years old, and we were watching Roots, and she turned around to me and said, "Daddy, what's a Negro?" And I'll never tell you what I explained to her. But I knew we were no longer Negroes, you know. And with that,
Well, thank you, guys. So I hope everyone in this room really took note to what our panelists were saying. It's gonna take us to be sick and tired of being sick and tired. The new generation, it starts with us, it looks like us, because we're coming back to that time. So these are stuff that we need to understand, pay tribute and honor to those who fought before us, because the fight is still coming, okay? So due to time, we're gonna open it up to the audience to get one question.
With Trump? Oh, okay. I'm being fair to you.
With Trump taking away Black history from us after our forefathers fought so hard for our rights, how do we fight to stop that from happening? And is there anyone that you know that will stand like Martin Luther King or Malcolm X did, that will fight for our rights, so our future generation won't suffer the consequences? And if so, where did we start?
Oh, well, I think what you have to understand is what Fannie Lou Hamer said. We were sick and tired of being sick and tired. You made change. See, this is what has to be understood. You see, all these movies and all these documentaries about Dr. Martin Luther King, he has the S on his chest. And he's the man that led the civil rights movement. Now, don't get me wrong. He, as far as I'm concerned, he was the greatest of all time. But that's not the point. You gotta look behind him. Who was there? You! See, this is what we've forgotten. And we don't teach this to our children. You! You the ones that has to be on the picket line. You the one that has to be at City Hall raising your hand. You the one that has to be cussing the mayor out for not doing what he's supposed to be doing to help us. It's you. It's you. It's you. That's what the civil rights movement was all about. That's what the rebellions that took place in this country were all about by black folk. It was just plain people like the people in this room who got out there and did what had to be done.
Okay, thank you so much, and again, thank you all to the panelists, and please, everyone, feel free to approach the questions, and thank you, everyone. And I'm going to be red eye.
Thank you. Can we give our panelists and Ms. Yoni Kendrick another round of applause? They've done a phenomenal job. Thank you so much. Thank you.